What's going on, people? Today we're going to once again be talking about Rell. For those who might not know, I already talked about this game once, quite a while ago. I took a look at their Rell movie and basically weighed in on how I felt about everything that was in it. The quick Cliff Notes version of what I took away from that video was the production value on the video was very, very lackluster. The hype for the game was going to be the game's greatest enemy. The progression system had me very worried because it looked like just overhyped RuneScape, which is not great for a progression system, at least in my opinion. The animations and effects looked fantastic, but I always worry about the fact that when people are so focused on the visual aspect of a game, they forget about, well, the actual important part, the game. And most importantly, I wanted to know, what even is Rell? What is the game supposed to be, and what void is it trying to fill? And I would say, with the most recent Rell movie, we're probably sitting at about 50-50 when it comes to things that I'm less worried about, or things that are remaining pretty much the same. We can very easily start at the top of the list when it comes to production value compared to the first Rell movie, and, well, they face-planted again. So listen, I know whichever one of the Rell brothers that was making this video watched a whole lot of The Boys before making it and was like, genius, that'll make our trailer fantastic. But the AI butcher voice, not it, at all. It was grating, obnoxious, and I am not the only person who thinks that, because you can go into the comments and some of the top comments are talking about how the AI voice, that ain't it, Chief. It's funny though, because I don't know if I would prefer the endless ramblings of the developers or the AI voice. And I think the sad thing is that it's probably a little bit in between. I wish the developers had used most of the script that they used with the AI voice and actually spoke themselves about their own game instead of the obnoxious AI. In the beginning of their own video, when they have the parrot, which is assumedly going to be in the game, that also either sounds like a really poor AI voice or an awful voice actor. And I hope to God they get feedback on that stuff and change it before the game comes out, because if not, yeah, that's gonna be a problem.
Come on now, love. Crouch down, sneak up on their tummy like a shadow in the night, and give it a good whack. Still running about like a landlubber? Hold that crouch button to slide with style. A true pirate on deck. While running, it activates parkour mechanics.
And the final note on the production value before we move on is that the audio balancing for the Rell movie is really bad. And I don't know if it's because of Roblox or what, but it sounds muffled and distant. If you've watched it, you know what I'm talking about. It's just weird. Now, as for the rest of this video, I'm just gonna kind of sort of go through the video and talk about things of note that popped up. Anyways, when it comes to our first real look at the AI combat, which is clearly taken from the tutorial, it's very obvious things have changed a lot, and that becomes even more clear when we jump ahead really quick to a different section of the video where they're showing some of their pseudo PvP. In this section, we see their commitment to making the gameplay better and avoiding some pitfalls that people rightfully pointed out in the first movie. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that giving people 800 air dashes is not going to make for a very interesting gameplay loop. And because of that, they've reduced the amount of air dashes significantly. Now, whether or not that'll matter in the grand scheme of things, I think remains to be seen, because throughout this movie, we don't see a real balls-to-the-walls PvP fight. And I think that was either a really clueless missed opportunity by the guys behind this, or on the other hand, it could have been knowingly done as a bit of a sinister deception. And that's the thing that worries me. We can watch two people trade blows back and forth in what seems like a turn-based combat game, but without being able to see a real fight between two players, well, it gets me more than a little bit worried. It makes me even more worried when we consider the fact that later on in the video we see entire uncut boss fights. And yet with the PvP they either completely forgot to showcase it or are so horrified in the current state of things that they didn't want to. And I hope for their sake it's the first option. Now, after some of the PvP stuff was showed off, we got a better look into progression and how a lot of the progression is going to work in the game. And here's where I think things got a hell of a lot better and look a lot more streamlined and less, well, RuneScape. Whether or not the RuneScape systems are still there, I'm not entirely sure. I assume yes in some capacity, but we'll see. On the left, we can see a pretty standard stat distribution system: health, defense, willpower, luck, spiritual, and endurance. What all these stats do individually, I'm not entirely sure, but some of them are pretty obvious, like your health. What's more interesting, though, is the right side of the screen, which talks about your max potential. From the looks of things, you get 3 potential cards, and these different cards can help you in a variety of different ways, with you being able to equip 1 offensive, 1 defensive, and 1 agility card. Each of these cards, or posters as they refer to them in-game, is able to give you a different power, like being able to parry quicker or have a completely different dash. When you read through some of the ones they scroll through, it looks really interesting, and it's even more interesting when we learn about how you obtain them. From the sounds of things, rather than things just being randomly obtained or based off of your stat points, you're going to be able to get different potential posters from doing different activities, whether it be fighting against a boss or leveling up a certain faction. And I think that's a really, really cool system, because it means that if you start off the game and decide to go into one direction and someone else goes in a different direction, and then you run across each other, you're going to have access to completely different mechanics when it comes to fighting if you choose to do so. I can also presume that it means that we'll have some interesting dialogues between players. If you see somebody using something that you don't have, then you're going to ask them, hey, where'd you get that? And then you might go do an activity that you otherwise might never have done, solely because you saw someone using something and you know that somewhere on the map is where you can obtain that ability as well. Obviously, we're in the age of the internet, so I'm sure people will just use the wiki and look that stuff up, but at the end of the day, I think it's a really good system, assuming it's implemented properly, and definitely the best thing that I could pull out of this entire movie. Now, the second to last thing that we're going to be talking about today when it came to the Rell movie was, of course, the 2 boss fights that they showed, which were uncut, and God, I wish they'd done this for a PvP fight. Regardless, looking at the boss fights, I have basically no complaints here. This stuff all looks fantastic. The animations are certainly second to none on the Roblox platform. The moveset that it looks like the enemies have is easily counterable if you learned the patterns. And the idea of having a locked-on Elden Ring, Dark Souls-esque camera is a super neat idea. I will say that the readability on the Tiger boss seemed like it might have been a little bit rough, and we also didn't have the benefit of having the sound effects for either of the bosses, if they even have sound effects. And if you know anything about boss design, you know that sound design is very important in terms of figuring out which attacks are going to attack when, just as important arguably as the visuals. So I think we can be led to assume that if the sound design is as good as the visual effects, then we're probably in good shape, but if not, there could be some problems. And of course, on the final topic for today, we have the hockey. Now, as someone who has absolutely no clue about One Piece and has only watched the first 10 episodes when I was in middle school, which was a very, very long time ago, I'm old, I don't know a whole lot about how this stuff functions. Reference, go get the vision hockey from my Blocks Fruit video. I don't know what the hell that means. And because of that, I don't have a whole lot to say on the final aspect of progression that they touched on at the end of the video. It looks to me like it's going to be very, very similar to the progression features that we were seeing earlier when it came to your potential, where different hockey powers will just give you different abilities, whether they be active or passive. Either way, I feel like a broken record saying this, what'll really end up mattering is the progression on all of this stuff, and whether or not it's fun to interact and level this stuff up rather than just being a Blocks Fruit grind. And that was pretty much all there was to note when it came to the Rell movie. I'll be honest, I don't know how the hell they managed to stretch this video to 46 minutes, because it probably easily could have just been cut in half. At the end of the day, I'm saying the same stuff that I was saying way long ago. Make damn sure you temper your expectations for this kind of stuff to make sure that you don't get burned, but it's perfectly okay if you're excited for it, because I know that you guys have been stuck on Blocks Fruit for however long, and that game's a pile of shit. So any game that doesn't look like a pile of shit looks pretty damn good. The only thing that I would be worried about if I were you was PvP. They didn't show it basically at all, and I myself worry that it will just turn into a stilted animation fest rather than any interesting gameplay. But hey, that remains to be seen. With that though, I am done here, so of course, naturally, if you enjoyed the video, you can leave a like and subscribe. If you didn't, don't. And with all that being said, have a wonderful day and night wherever you are, and I'll see you guys next time.